It's Saturday, the 23rd of January. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blancolirio channel. It's time for an update on the Sriwijaya 737-500 aircraft that went down in Indonesia on 9 January of this year. Search and rescue operations have come to a conclusion. There were no survivors. Investigators have been able to record the flight data recorder and the CVR, the cockpit voice recorder. However, they have yet to obtain the memory chip from inside the cockpit voice recorder. So they found the CVR. It appears to have broken apart and the memory chip is missing. What's being widely reported in Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, unfortunately well before the initial preliminary accident report comes out, which should come out here in a week or two, what's being reported is that investigators are looking into the auto throttles of this 737 and the auto throttle function. So today I want to do a general discussion on the use of auto throttles in general and on the 737 and give you a little better understanding of how that system works in day-to-day operations. You can see my previous update, the first update on this crash from 10 January to see the specifics about the Flight Radar 24 data as we knew it at the time. But basically, this flight took off from Jakarta's International Airport and 5 minutes later crashed into the Java Sea. The aircraft made it to an altitude of about 10,000 feet. The air traffic controllers were querying about their heading control as they were not getting on the heading that was assigned to them by ATC. There was no response from the crew, and then the aircraft went down in what appears to be a spiral into the ocean. At this time, it appears that the aircraft did come down in one piece with both engines running. The Boeing 737-500 involved is an older model of Boeing 737, formerly owned by Continental and United, and was stored since from March to December by the Indonesian airlines, and then brought out of service after going through a maintenance program following basically the directives of the FAA here in the States to bring such an aircraft out of mothball storage, if you will, and put it back into service. And the aircraft had flown several flights before the accident flight. But maintenance records do indicate that there was a problem with one of the auto throttles, one or both of the auto throttles on this Boeing 737. And flight data recording information can also easily show you the position of the throttles and give you an indication if there was a split in the throttles on the FDR data. But in order to solve this mystery, we really got to get the cockpit voice recorder information to see how the crew reacted to this situation before we can put this puzzle together. Automation is widely used throughout the airline industry. Autopilot and auto throttles work together, though they are, to the pilot, basically two separate systems. So let's go over some of the basics. One of the first rules regarding automation in these complicated aircraft is when the automation fails to do what you want it to do as a pilot, you need to downgrade that level of automation right away to a level of understanding that all of us can agree upon. In other words, if the auto throttles are not working, you need to click the auto throttles off and manually take over the throttles. Same thing with the autopilot. If the autopilot is not giving you the desired results, you need to click off the autopilot and hand fly the aircraft. This is the preliminary step in a series of emergency procedures, particularly unreliable airspeed. First step is to click off the autopilot and the auto throttles. And if, in fact, the auto throttles were a factor in this crash, this is a continuing disturbing trend, especially among third world countries around the world flying these complicated aircraft. And it's a problem for all of us, over-reliance on automation. Very rarely do we hand fly any of these aircraft anymore, especially in my case on the Boeing 777, where you're doing super long-haul flying, and you're only hand flying the aircraft generally for the last 1,000 feet or so of the landing and maybe the first 1,000 feet or so of the takeoff before you turn the autopilot on. during that time, the auto throttles are generally always on. So let me go through some of the muscle memory items here. If I'm in the right seat as the co-pilot looking at you, I'm flying the aircraft, the yoke, with my right hand, and my thumb, I know that the autopilot disconnect is right down about here. The stabilizer trim double switch is right about here, and the microphone for the radio communication is right about here. So these are three muscle memories that you've just got to have sorted out. And on the throttles, on the throttle quadrant, you've got the two throttles, and right here onto the left side where your thumb is located the auto throttle disconnect button. Just ahead of the throttles is the toga switch, takeoff or go around switch, and that's how you basically engage the auto throttle once the auto throttles are armed on the mode control panel. Tapping the toga switch on takeoff will engage the auto throttles to the preset limit set in the computer. And finally, reverse thrust is located ahead of that. Two knobs ahead, pull them up over the gate and bring the thrust reversers back on landing. So those are some of the basic thumb coordination exercises you just have memorized in your eye-hand coordination memory of flying the aircraft. And the first, if you have a problem with the automation, you either got to downgrade the automation or turn the automation off and hand fly the aircraft. So that's click click on the autopilot and click click on the auto throttles. Why two clicks, click click? That turns off the annoying warning siren and horn of the warning system of the aircraft. If you just hit one click, you might get a very annoying wah 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 or some kind of a warning system indicating that the auto throttle is disconnected. If you click it twice, it'll silently turn off the autopilot. You want to verbalize that to the other crew member anytime you do that. The auto throttles on these aircraft, most any of the Boeing aircraft, have a complicated series of modes that they can operate in. These auto throttles also are servo controlled, so the throttles themselves move up and down as they adjust the power automatically to the engines, so you can feel the throttles moving, so you as the pilot can be part of the automation of the system, if you will, as these auto throttles move back and forth. Unlike Airbus aircraft, where you set the throttles into a detent, on Airbus, those throttles do not move. The engine gauges move up and down, but the throttles do not on an Airbus aircraft. In a Boeing, they do move. These auto throttles in Boeing aircraft are servo controlled to make this motion happen. This servo control can be easily overridden by the pilot. So even if you don't click the auto throttles off, you can still force the auto throttles to move, but if you let go of the auto throttles without disconnecting the auto throttles, they will go back to whatever commanded position they're trying to get to. Now if you have a split in the auto throttles, it's very similar to, it may very well be similar to an engine failure to you, but you should be able to recognize that it's simply that the throttles are split, because on the Boeing aircraft, the throttles will physically move, and you can click off the auto throttles and set them to the desired position. Even if they split tremendously, an engine failure, a pilot should easily be able to handle an engine failure situation while on climb out. The aircraft, of course, will fly just fine on one engine. And what's the first step of the engine failure checklist? Auto throttle, affected side, off. You turn off the auto throttle to the engine that's giving you troubles, and then you carry on with the checklist from there. You verify with the other pilot the throttle that's giving you the problem, with the engine that's giving you the problem, and you retard that throttle, and then if you need to, go shut down that engine. So again, the first step of any of these emergencies is to turn the auto throttle or auto throttles off. So at this point, it's hard for me to imagine that just the auto throttles splitting on this crew could have brought this aircraft down. There must be some other extenuating circumstances that we don't know yet, and we won't know until the flight data recorder information is publicly released, and hopefully we'll have more information on that with the preliminary report coming out on or about the 8th or 9th of February. I hope this gives you a little better understanding of the daily use of auto throttles in the 737. Stay tuned. We'll keep you posted and updated. Thanks so much for the folks on Patreon that makes this content possible, because when we're dealing with these sort of situations, YouTube will demonetize the content. Thank you so much for your support. See you here.